Welcome. In this Ignitia tutorial, we will be discussing the Grading, Pacing, and Assessment sub-tab, which will give you a better understanding of how to set the pass thresholds, pacing, assignment weighting, and restrictions for Ignitia online assignments. Please note before we start, you must have administrative access on your Ignitia site to create or adjust default grading, pacing, and assessment settings, or find someone who does in order to make the changes that you wish. And you must have the change grading, pacing, and assessments permission in order to customize the default settings for an individual student or enrollment. We'll begin in the School Settings tab, which is only visible to users with admin status, and will focus on the Grading, Pacing, and Assessment sub-tab. Here you will enter default pass thresholds, pacing settings, and assignment weighting that will be applied to all students. Please be aware, though, that each setting can be customized on a student-by-student or enrollment-by-enrollment basis. The first item under grading and pacing is the CRX Pass Threshold. This will be the default passing score on the pretest in CRX enrollments. If the student reaches or exceeds the pass threshold on a unit's pretest, all content in that unit will be skipped and the student will be assigned the pretest for the next unit. You'll want to enter a score here that will be appropriate for the majority of your students. Remember that reaching this score will allow students to skip the remainder of the unit, so you may want to consider setting it 10 to 15% higher than your lowest acceptable passing score. Since we are talking about the CRX Pass Threshold, let's scroll down past these other settings for a moment and look at two related options, the Flex CRX and Flex Skipped options. Placing a check mark in the Flex CRX box will activate this feature. When a course enrollment is made in the CRX mode with Flex, any student who does not achieve the CRX Pass Threshold on a unit pretest will only be given the assignments in that unit associated with questions answered incorrectly from the pretest. The assignments in the unit that correspond to questions correctly answered on the pretest are automatically skipped. All of the associated questions on the quiz that follows the skipped lesson are also skipped. But questions associated to a skipped lesson are not skipped on the unit post-test, which will provide you a true pre- and post-test comparison. If you choose not to activate Flex CRX, the students enrolled in courses in the CRX mode will still skip all unit content when they reach or exceed the pass threshold for a unit's pretest. But those who do not meet the pass threshold for a unit's pretest will be required to complete all unit assignments. When you activate Flex CRX, you'll notice that the Flex Skip box is also automatically checked when Flex Skipped is enabled. If teachers or admins skip an assignment in any Flex-compatible course, the quizzes and tests that follow will automatically adapt to match the material covered. Though, as a reminder, in the Flex CRX mode, questions are only skipped on quizzes, not on the unit post-test. You can see if a course is compatible with Flex by looking in the Information column of the Courses tab. Any Flex-compatible course will show the word Flex within the Information column. What this means is that these courses are set up to work with the Flex CRX and Flex Skipped options. Notice that Flex Skipped is also available independent of Flex CRX if you choose not to enable the Flex CRX feature. Let's now return to the top of the page to discuss the remaining pass thresholds and settings. We'll begin with the lesson pass threshold. Within each Ignitia lesson is a set of comprehension questions designed to demonstrate mastery of the lesson content. The lesson pass threshold is the score that the student must meet or exceed in order to move on to the new content. You'll want to enter a score that will be appropriate for the majority of your students, keeping in mind that this setting can be customized on a student-by-student or enrollment-by-enrollment basis. You will then need to enter the maximum number of automatic attempts you would like Ignitia to allow on lessons when students do not meet your lesson pass threshold on the first attempt. Please be aware that when a lesson is reassigned, it will be the same lesson content and questions. You'll want to find the right number of attempts for the majority of your student population. Too many attempts can lead to guessing or student frustration if the student truly does not understand the material. When you are deciding on this number, think about how many times a teacher would reassign a pencil paper assignment if the student were struggling. If at any point the student reaches or exceeds the lesson pass threshold, Ignitia will record that score and assign the next activity. When the student has exhausted all of the attempts without passing, Ignitia will record the score on the final attempt as the score for the lesson and then assign the next assignment. You do, though, have the option to block lesson progress. Activating this feature will prevent students from moving on to the new assignment if they haven't reached the pass threshold on the prior lesson. Even after using all of their allowed attempts, the teacher of record will receive an action alerting him or her that the student has not passed the lesson. The teacher will have the option then of reassigning all or part of the lesson, and then he or she will decide when the student is ready to move on to the next assignment. Next, you will see the same three settings for quizzes and tests. You'll enter your quiz pass threshold and the number of attempts that you would like students to be given in order to reach the quiz pass threshold. Then, decide if you'd like to block quiz progress, which, like block lesson progress, will prevent students from moving on to a new assignment if they don't meet the quiz pass threshold. Last, set your test pass threshold, which will be the minimum score that you would want students to earn on their summative unit assessments in order to prove that they have achieved mastery. Enter the maximum amount of attempts you want to give students in order to reach the test pass threshold. And decide if you want to block test progress if students do not meet the test pass threshold. Blocking progress can be one of your strongest intervention tools in Ignitia, but you may be hesitant to activate it because you feel it would hinder your students' advancement through the course. This feature can be used strategically. If you want your teachers to be notified when students are not meeting pass thresholds, but you don't want your students to be stopped after every assignment, you may want to consider blocking progress only after quizzes and tests. This will allow students to work through their lesson content without restrictions, but will alert teachers if students are not successful on their assessments. The teacher can then revisit their prior lessons and reteach as needed before allowing the students to move on to the new material. Please remember that these settings will be applied to all students, but they can be adjusted on a student-by-student or enrollment-by-enrollment basis as needed. Next, we'll move on to monitored assessments. You may need to scroll down a bit to locate these options. Placing a check mark in the quiz and/or test box here will prevent students from accessing assessments without permission from their teachers. This will ensure that your students are only able to access their assessments in a monitored or proctored environment. The final section on this page is where you'll get to set the default assignment weighting for your Ignitia site. Ignitia has 4 assignment types. They include lessons, projects, quizzes, and tests. And each of these has a separate weighting value. The weighting value determines the scores for each assignment type that are factored into the unit and then the overall course score. You can find out more information about how Ignitia grades assignments by accessing our other tutorials that are available at aopschools.com. You'll need to enter a weight value for each category and be sure that the total for all 4 equals 100. This is another default setting that will be applied to all students but can be adjusted on a student-by-student or enrollment-by-enrollment basis. When you have entered all the default settings, be sure to click the Save button at the bottom of the page. These settings can be changed on an individual student's profile as needed. For example, you may have a student who has an IEP that states that the student should have more attempts on assignments than you've set as your default max lesson attempts. When creating a user profile for a new student who needs customized settings, you'll start in the Students tab on the navigation bar. From here, you'll click the Create Student button. In the Create Student window, enter the student's information. Scroll down and then place a check mark in the box next to Personalized Grading and Pacing. This will activate the fields below and allow you to make any needed changes to the default pass thresholds and maximum allowed attempts that are already in place. Scroll down further on the form and place a check mark in the box next to Personalized Weights in order to change the assignment weightings. Then click Save. Please be aware, though, that any changes you make to an individual student's profile will be applied to all courses in which the student is enrolled. So if that student with an IEP will be using Ignitia for multiple subjects, but only has an IEP in one course, you will not want to change the settings here. We'll come back to that in just a minute. If you need to make changes to any of these settings for an existing student, you'll again start with the Students tab. This time, search for the existing student that you wish to work with, and then click Edit from the Controls column. Here you'll follow the same steps that we just discussed. Be sure to click the Save button at the bottom of the page, though, before leaving the Edit Student window in order to save these changes that have been made to the student's profile. Any future work the student does in their courses will reflect the updates made here. Earlier, we discussed a student who is using Ignitia for multiple subjects and has an IEP for one of the courses. We didn't want to change the settings for the student in all of his or her courses, so let's look at how to change the settings for one enrollment. If you need to make changes to the default settings while you're enrolling a student, you'll want to start with the Gradebook tab on the navigation bar and select the Add Enrollment button. From here, enter the student, the teacher, the course, and the term, and then click the Gear button at the top right of the enrollment window. Select Yes next to Personalized Grading and Pacing to change the pass thresholds and the maximum allowed attempts. You can also select Yes next to Personalized Weights in order to change the assignment weighting percentages. The changes made here will only be applied to the student or students and the course or courses on the previous enrollment form. Click the Save Settings button to return to the form and complete the enrollment. You can also make changes after a student has been enrolled into a course. To make changes on an existing enrollment for a student, go to either the Course Enrollment or the Gradebook tab from the navigation bar. From whichever one you choose, you're going to search for the student. From the Course Enrollment tab, once you've located the course that you wish to change, you will need to click Edit in the Actions column. You will then follow the same steps that we previously discussed. Be sure to click Save Settings in order for the changes that you've made to take effect. If you choose to work from the Gradebook tab, you will do the same, but you'll need to select Edit from the drop-down list in the Actions column. You will then follow the same steps that we previously discussed regarding the changes to enrollment settings. Again, be sure to click the Save Settings button in order for the changes that you've made to take effect. If you have further questions or would like more information, please contact technical support at 800-735-4193 and select option 1. Thank you for viewing this Ignitia tutorial.